Welcome once again. This is session 2 of our introduction to the C++ programming language. We'll be looking at fundamental types, constants, keywords, and variables all throughout by reviewing 5 sample C++ programs that we've put together for you. Now, before each program, I will review the main concept, but for a more detailed explanation, I do recommend going over the support material that we have provided. You want to run the code on your machine using the development environment just to make sure that it's working, you can feel free to do so. But bear in mind that the main focus of this session will be on getting those fundamentals right before you can start writing your own code in the following sessions, which will be fully hands-on. Let's get started then. We have here the overview of the fundamental types. You have Boolean, which is normally true or false. And then for characters, you have char and wchar. Then you have integers, you have short, int, long. And then lastly, you have floating point values, which is float, double, and long double. And you might be wondering, what's the difference between all of those? Why can't we just store things in just one type, right? And that's because they each have a different size and a different range of values that they can represent. As you can see, char is quite small. You can only go from negative 128 to 127 or 0 to 255. Now you can have a specific char, which would be an unsigned chart or a signed char, in which case you limit that range. So unsigned char is 0 to 255, and then signed chart, you include the negative numbers. If you look at int, you have it can go from 2 to 4 bytes depending on the size of the decimal number that you want to represent. Or you have the unsigned int, which is only positive values. And here we have our sample program. So looking at the sample program, we start with the preprocessors at the top. So we have to include statements for two modules that we're accessing. The IO stream we were talking about in session 1, as you recall, is for input and output into the console, right? Then we have C limits, which we have a comment right next to it. As you can see, that comment starts with 2 slashes. This is a single line comment that will follow through the end of the statement. So it says this is the definition of int max, etc. So this we know that is going to define the int min and int max constants. We have this one here, so int min and int max. And you'll see that the comment ends with a semicolon. This is something that we haven't talked about yet, but every statement, every instruction will normally end with a semicolon. This is how we let the compiler know we're done with this instruction, okay? So it's something to bear in mind. And then afterwards, we jump into our main function, which we've discussed before. So you should remember we have the integer return type, the main, which is the function name. Then we have these two parentheses. Now, these parentheses are not necessarily there for no reason. It's something that is required in the body of every function, right? And when we have those two parentheses, normally what we put in there are called arguments. But in this case, the main function does not take in any arguments. And what are arguments? Argument is data that is passed into a function. We'll cover that in more detail later on, but for now, you just need to know that these two parentheses, the opening and the closing, is to hold arguments for that function. And as we don't have any in this case, you just open it and you close it right away. Then you have the opening and the closing brackets, and inside, this is the interesting bit. This is where we have the body of our function. We start with cout, and then the separator here. And now this here, these two arrows to the left, this is called the insertion operator. So it does separate, for example, you have here a string and then you have two line breaks. It does separate those. But primarily what it does is it sends information to cout. And cout, what it basically does is it prints out the console. So it's something to bear in mind. The direction of the arrows is important because it basically works with cout. It's an operator. Now, in here, we are outputting the following message, range of types int and unsigned int. Then we have two line breaks, and then that semicolon again that I was talking about. So we are ending the statement. So as you can see, there's no semicolon up here. So this entire line is one statement altogether, even though we've split it into two lines. Then we go on to print type minimum maximum. Okay, then we do a line break. We print a line, another line break, and then here we print int. And now this here is a constant. Normally constants are defined in capitals, and a constant is generally a variable that has a value which does not change. Okay, so this is coming from C limits. It is defined in this module. So in this case, this would get printed out, the minimum size of that integer, the minimum number, and then the maximum number of that int. Okay, and then for unsigned int, you get it printed out down here. It starts with 0, and then it would print out the maximum of basically unsigned int. And for that, just refer to the table above. And then you get a line break. And then lastly, we end up with return 0, which would basically communicate and signify that the function or the program has run successfully.